But I mean, certainly, when we look at the economic development opportunities for this province, energy is front and center. So there's a big push on that with wind, with oil, gas. So obviously there's just a need for that brain power to focus on that.
But specifically, the minister's office budget within energy has gone up by 60%. Why did that have to go up?
I think some, I can double check, but my rough understanding across the board is obviously the collapse of CNS had some ramifications that people went elsewhere, right? So people who would have traditionally been in CNS are now in other departments. So I think that is probably part of it.
So you picked up communication staff in essence?
Yeah, they would have got dispersed through, right? So if you've seen that across a number of departments, it's probably something like that. I know some of them went to Executive Council office as an example.
Sure. Do you have any concerns when folks look at the out years of this budget, assuming nothing changes? The debt will effectively have doubled under your time as Premier. Does that concern you? Significant
infrastructure needs we're facing our province. Like, I don't know how many stories have been written about the state of healthcare infrastructure. I don't know how many stories have been written about bridges and roads and schools. So obviously the demand for investments in infrastructure was well known to Nova Scotians. So we had a choice. We could do what has been done and just put our heads in the sand and pretend it didn't exist and ignore it, or we could invest in the infrastructure that is around the province that's needed to keep people safe and to really improve our quality of life. So we've invested in infrastructure. We'll continue to do that. Did you tip the scales in order for Mr. Woodburn to become director of the PPS on a permanent basis? No, I wasn't involved in that process at all. Did you have any meetings with him at all to discuss that job? No. So when you listen to the comments that Ms. Drouin made during question period, do you know what she's talking about, or is it the first time you've heard any of that? No, I wasn't familiar with what she was talking about. And so as far as you're aware, was the independent panel recommendations followed for the appointment of Mr. Woodburn? I actually wasn't involved in the process at all. I'm not sure of it, but I do know he's a good person. And he does a good job, and for people that I know who work in that service have been are pleased with the appointment, but I wasn't involved in that process. I was struck by a comment that your minister made when he was responding to Ms. Drouin about Mr. Woodburn being a true Nova Scotian. Do you think someone needs to be a true Nova Scotian in order to get a job of prominence like that here in the province? I don't think that's what the minister was saying. I think he was just saying this is a person who cares about the province. We want people, it's good when we have people working in public service who care about the province. That's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. Sorry, I think the words he actually used were Nova Scotia born. I'm pretty sure I wrote it down because it was unusual to hear it. Nova Scotia born. Does somebody have to be born here? I don't think he was insinuating that was part of the criteria. I think he was just saying it's a good Nova Scotian. There's lots of good Nova Scotians, actually, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that.
With the Powering Economy Act, I wanted to ask you, in your view, did previous governments ignore or maybe neglect the natural resource opportunities here? Is that what you feel?
Oh, they went a little step further than that. They actually banned a lot of the opportunities. Yes, and I just think that now as a province, when we look at the state of things in where our economy is, where our economy ranks relative to other jurisdictions in North America, and what's happening with our country. Obviously, the Prime Minister has a push on resource development as well, and we have a lot to add to that, and we're gonna add to it.
Have they held us back in a way then? And if so, what are you doing now to change it? When do we start seeing revenue generated by some of these projects? Like,
well, I think our country went through a period of almost 10 years where there was no meaningful major projects approved in our country, zero, for 10 years. Obviously, that has held our country back, and our province is the same. Banning resource development without having a discussion about what's possible to do safely and sustainably. So we're having those discussions, and I'm really excited about the potential we have as a province. Really excited.
$7,000 per megawatt for the first 10 years of offshore wind. would bring in about $35 million annually under that first phase of 5 gigawatts. Is this the windfall that you were really hoping for with offshore wind?
I think there's a couple of parts to it. So you're referring to the amount in the bill, I think. So I think what I would say, for me, what the bill signifies is a couple of things. One, it lays the path, lays the groundwork for this development to happen. That's a good thing. And two, it sends a message to Nova Scotians that there is significant opportunity that will come from the jobs and employment that go around, the spin-off from that. This is thousands of jobs in every discipline you can possibly think of, from caterers to tradespeople to engineers to lawyers. Going to need a few accountants in there too. It's thousands of jobs. That's a significant impact on our economy overall. And the other part of that, the message that we want to send to Nova Scotians is there will be a direct benefit. So that'll be part of. There's a needle to be thread there. Because we don't want to be too aggressive on that it scares people away. But we also want to send a message that our expectation is that there's a direct benefit for Nova Scotians. So that will be there'll be something there, and we'll work through that.
And the transition from Nova Scotia Power to the independent energy system operator is looking like it's going to take at least a year and a half longer than expected. Ratepayers will pay for part of that before the ISO is actually doing all of the work that it will eventually do. Is this transition working the way that you wanted it to?
This is when I think about what's happening in our province in the energy part, certainly with Nova Scotia Power. This entity is the most significant change that we could possibly make. This is a big deal. And basically what has, traditionally Nova Scotia Power has been the player in the game and the referee. They've literally had the pen on everything. And we've taken that away from them now. And this organization will look at procurement. It will look at all kinds of really important things that will have a lasting impact for generations in this province. The transition we have to get it right. If it takes a little longer, that's okay. It's a very significant change. But directionally, it's moving the right way. And this is a really important change for Nova Scotians. It's a big deal.
Does a levy on EVs and hybrids make sense at a time when the federal government is incentivizing people to buy these vehicles?
Sorry, on the EV cars?
Yes.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's just when you think about the investments in capital and infrastructure, the EVs have a wear and tear element on our roads and highways as well. They're generally a lot heavier, so they sometimes have quite a bit more wear and tear. And the owners of those vehicles should pay something towards that, and that's what's happening with the levy, and that's fair.
The money raised by the levy only equates to about the cost of paving 3 kilometers of highway, though. It doesn't seem like it's making a whole lot of a dent if, in fact, the whole point of doing this is because they cause damage to the roads.
I guess unless you live on one of those 3 kilometers of highway.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yes. Ms. Chender, what do you think it says about the way the government manages finances if, assuming the out years for this current budget holds, the provincial deficit will have doubled under the time that Tim Houston has been...
the debt.
Pardon me, the provincial debt will... Thank you.
Collaboration.
That's right. The provincial debt will have doubled under the time that Tim Houston's been premier.
I think it's something that Nova Scotians should be incredibly concerned about. This government have been terrible fiscal managers, and we have no transparency. Look, families across this province are working hard and saving money and trying to pay their bills and live within their budgets, and this is something that this government has said plainly they don't believe they need to do. They will use our money however they want. They will not stay within their budget, and they won't even tell us how they're spending it outside. And so it's a fundamental problem. The debt servicing costs are enormous, and we need a government that will actually be responsible and be transparent with Nova Scotians and not spend billions of dollars of their money outside of a transparent budget process without giving us information.
Premier seems to suggest that all of this spending that they've done has been in response to a lack of spending by previous governments. But is there a middle ground somewhere in there that would not have doubled the debt?
Yeah, government announcements don't put food on the table. Results do. I'm old enough to remember when this government called themselves solutionists. That wasn't about how much money they were spending. It was about the results that they were going to deliver for Nova Scotians. And the reality is they've spent all that money. But if they were serious about fixing health care, we wouldn't be having the questions we have about emergency care and prenatal care. If they were serious about housing, it wouldn't be so hard to find housing that people can afford in this province. And if they were serious about energy, that we just heard from the Minister of Energy, we wouldn't see skyrocketing power bills. So the middle way is to have some transparency. That's what democracy is. A government has a plan, they put it forward in a legislative body, we debate the plan, we make it better, we know what we're talking about, we know what our budget envelope is, and then we move forward. And this government has steadfastly resisted any ability for anyone to be a check. They have destroyed crown corporations. They're appointing their friends to various positions. There's a new one every year, it seems. And now we are in a massive deficit position. Our debt is growing uncontrollably, and the message seems to be nothing to see here, don't worry about it. I think Nova Scotians are getting tired of being told that they should give this government the benefit of the doubt when they don't see the results that they were promised and when the future outlook isn't good.
Is the planning to ask offshore wind developers for enough if they're getting 7,000 per megawatt for the first 10 years?
Listen, this government and this premier are so focused on carrots to the private sector that they seem to be forgetting about what Nova Scotians are asking them to do, which is let them have a life that allows them to stay in this province. So on the face of it, no. I mean, I think if we are going to sell our natural resources, if these projects are ever to become a reality, and we still don't have a lot of evidence that they will, we need to make sure that Nova Scotians benefit first. We know that Nova Scotians won't benefit from the power. Our grid can't absorb it. We are talking about a massive project to sell energy to America. Not to help us with our own energy needs, not to help us with our own energy bills, not to help us with our climate commitments. The least we could expect is to have government revenue that will help us pay for services.
Do you think we'll ever balance the budget on offshore wind?
Not in my working lifetime. So, never say never. But this is a project that will take decades if it ever comes to pass. So the idea that we can look at the proposed Wind West as some sort of solution to the deficit that we're in now is fundamentally dishonest. It's apples to oranges. This project is something that may come to pass decades down the road, and we've been told today in the legislation we won't see revenues for another 10 years after that are significant. So one has nothing to do with the other.
You mentioned in the House today that you have concerns about ministerial office budgets increasing significantly in a few cases.
Yeah.
You were probably in the room when the Premier gave his explanation
Yeah.
for his office as the Minister of Energy. What did you make of what he had to say?
The Premier made it sound like Communications Nova Scotia just accidentally disappeared. That's not what happened. This government, once again, this government that does not like transparency, that does not like independence, destroyed the independent communications arm of government, whose responsibility is to communicate the decisions and programs of government in a nonpartisan way, and have reallocated those budgets into ministerial and deputy minister line items where they are now mouthpieces for the ministers and their political aims. So I'll take the Premier at his word that it was a shuffling of the decks from CNS to the ministerial budgets. That's still a problem. What Nova Scotians need to understand is what government is doing and to be able to make decisions about that and access programs. What they don't need is propaganda from the minister's office telling them that everything's okay and everything is great when that doesn't match up with their reality.
I think of the way it looks, having the office budgets increase significantly at a time when the province is running a big deficit and it's cutting $300 million in spending.
I think the optics are terrible. You know, we are hearing today, as these cuts are announced, of people from one end of this province to the other who are losing their jobs. People at visitor information centers, people at museums, but also people whose organizations' funding is being cut back so severely that they'll lose their jobs and they won't be counted as part of that 30%. There is going to be a lot of pain in this province. There are going to be a lot of difficult conversation around dinner tables. And for all those folks to know that the ministers' offices are getting a budget boost is galling.
What did you think of what Ms. Druin raised during question period?
I think it's a very important question. As I said, this government has done everything it can to diminish any kind of independent body or arm's length professional governance body in our province. They didn't reinstate school boards. They folded all the Crown corporations. We don't have Crown corporations with independent boards anymore. We saw today that the Nova Scotia Community College president is going to be appointed by the Premier, and apparently he also appoints the head of our independent prosecution service. You know, we had a bill not long ago where we had the former head of the independent prosecution service before what was then law amendments, speaking compellingly about the importance of an independent prosecution service in a democracy. If we don't have an assurance that the head of that body, whoever they are, was appointed appropriately through an independent process, we have a big problem. And the minister's comments in the House today made us more concerned, not less. If we are going to have a government that leans back on tropes about who is a good Nova Scotian and that people born here are the ones who should, by birthright, be able to take public office regardless of independent processes, we have a real problem.
Sorry, on the NSCC appointment change, can you just say why shouldn't the government get to pick the head of the NSCC the way it picks the heads of Crown Corporation?
Because the government isn't in the business of running an educational institution. It's the same reason that the Minister of Education shouldn't be able to override a university senate. These are large, complex organizations that exist to shape future minds and create innovation and job opportunities and grow the economy of our province. Government should fund those things. Government should fund those things in a way that is responsible and accountable, and then they should get out of the way and let the best qualified people run them with as little interference as possible. And at every opportunity, this government does the opposite.
What do you make of the levy on EVs and hybrids at a time when the federal government is incentivizing people to buy them?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think this government isn't defending Nova Scotia. I think he's dividing Nova Scotia. I think this is something that they think will appeal to folks who are frustrated that they have to pay the motor vehicle tax, who drive for a living. We know that those folks are already frustrated with the government. I think if we're looking at truckers, the 80-20 rule was not popular, getting rid of that rule. But the reality is that passenger vehicles in general do not represent significant wear and tear on our roads. And this represents the only significant tax in our budget, which is going to be on people who are just trying to do the right thing. And I will note that this government, again, I'm old enough to remember when this government brought in the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Act and legislated emissions targets. Well, they've transferred that today to the IESO. They've washed their hands of it, and apparently they want to be the only jurisdiction that disincentivizes people from doing the right thing. It doesn't make any sense, and we're hearing from lots of Nova Scotians. I got a letter today from someone who said, copied to the Premier, copied to me, who said, look, I don't own an electric vehicle, but I want to. I want to do the right thing. Why are you doing this? We've gotten hundreds of emails like this. It doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Hello there.
Do you want us to wait for you? You should. Yep. Okay. Mr. Rankin, assuming that the out years of the budget hold true and nothing dramatic changes, what do you think it says about the Premier's ability to manage finances if the provincial debt effectively doubles under his time in office?
I think it's going to impact the province significantly, especially young people that are already grappling with some of the biggest costs in housing, and obviously future generations. We haven't seen this kind of mismanagement in a long time. The guardrails that the government had set up, as I referenced in there, already are criticized by the Independent Credit Agency by downgrading that and a negative outlook. Now we have a budget on top of that that reveals that they're planning to blow right through their own guardrails. And don't forget, the goal before was 30% of net to GDP. That was something put together by business, community groups, all three political parties that participated in the Ivany report. It was a target that's been long since gone, and now this government does not care about fiscal responsibility, despite what they're saying in the budget.
Premier has suggested that all of this spending is necessary to make up for deferred maintenance or lack of investments by previous governments, but do you think there's potentially a way to do that without also doubling the debt?
Of course there is. It's about balance and priorities. Every government could say that there was an infrastructure deficit. There was a multi-billion-dollar deficit when we came in, and we had to take care of schools that were falling apart with leaky roofs and highways that were twinned. The governments have to be able to say no sometime to spending, and at the end of every single year, they decided to use money that was flush from Ottawa, revenue coming in. They spent it all. Of course, some of it's going to go in some good places. But the point is you have to be able to balance that year after year and not spend it all every March.
They've talked a lot about using things like offshore wind and natural resources to help balance the books. Based on what we heard this morning in terms of offshore wind developers paying at most $35 million a year, do you think that's credible?
I'm not an expert in knowing the exact number that they should be paying, but I know that the discussion should be focused very much on transmission. So it's not a new conversation, natural resources. Even transmission connecting Atlantic Canada to the rest of Canada is not new. This goes back decades. This isn't just about wind offshore. This should be about connecting Canada, and that's how we're going to secure federal money to build that transmission. If there is significant public funding going into a project like this, there should be an equity stake for Nova Scotians. I really believe that. Beyond what fees are going to be charged to developing the resource, we need to find a way that we actually have some ownership for the province.
Has the Premier oversold this project as a way of sort of saving this province?
Well, it's ideal for him because it's so far out. So the Premier will, it's not going to happen in the next decade. This government won't be around. There's been lots of mega projects promised to Nova Scotians over the last number of decades. We're still the last in the country. When they inherited, the economy was in a great position in 2021 with population growing and a balanced budget. So obviously things have changed on the spending column. Things haven't changed on the revenue column.
Does the levy on hybrids and EVs make sense?
I think that that's an ideological decision, and when Nova Scotians are trying to help the government with their own stated climate goals, when there's a social cost that's decreased when you're driving an EV, I think it makes no sense. Even hybrids are amongst this group, so we're hearing from lots of Nova Scotians that are asking why were they asked to participate in helping the environment and help their own affordability. Why are they being penalized and singled out? And I think it's because the Premier does not like EVs. I remember that in the 2021 election where he sent letters out to rural communities complaining about the EV rebate that was in the province that they dismantled before. So this is a step further, not only taking away the incentive, but penalizing people for driving electric vehicles.
What do you think of the change at Labour Skills and Immigration that will allow government to have the final say of who the president of the NSCC is?
It checks with this government's influence on independent institutions. We have an enormous amount of public money going in to train the workforce for growth sectors, and the government shouldn't be able to handpick friends, whether it's an institution that's important as the NSCC, or judges, or the heads of important other divisions within government. I think there should be a competition. There's a competition for the board amongst our public sector, or our university and college sector, and they should be the ones making that decision.
Since you mentioned appointments, what did you think about what Ms. Drouin had to say today in question period?
I think it's an important conversation to have that I've been asking for the last 3 years. There has been a number of competitions, is my understanding, in that office. Independence in the public prosecution is so important. There's never been an equity candidate in that really influential position at the director level. We know that there was an investigation looking into the hiring practices at the public prosecution. I've been trying to get the findings of that report over the last 3 years in estimates. I've asked successive ministers of justice, including Mr. Drouin. So she raises a really important matter. We were suspicious that this would be the outcome, that they would not look at the competition and choose the successful candidate, and looks like they have done so. I don't know this gentleman or what his qualifications are compared to others, but it's deeply problematic when he's handpicked for an independent institution.
Just a question about the delay in the transition from Nova Scotia Power to the IESO. Do you have any sense as to why there is an 18-month delay in that handover?
It's a massive organization. It's going to be important to get that right. In terms of the timeline, we'll have questions around why they need more time, but they're a relatively small staffing complement, and getting the right information across managing the whole electricity grid, there could be some legitimate reasons of why.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Giroux, thank you.